We are in the third segment now of Chapter 9, looking at this discussion between Lewis and MacDonald. This opening discussion is MacDonald is helping Lewis understand what he's looking at, how to make sense of these conversations that ghosts are having with the bright people and the significance of the choices that they make. In The Problem of Pain, Lewis admits that he's always struggled with the dogma that some souls are eternally damned. He's always wanted to say, God will save everyone. But then he says, I always have this kind of next logical question that comes. Save everyone whether they will it or not? Whether they choose it or not? That's the problem. That's the great mystery of human freedom. That at the same time that God is omnipotent and that union with Him is a supernatural and completely dependent on His grace, somehow our salvation also demands our cooperation, that God works with us, and He's not going to work without us. If a creature has the power of free will, it is able to say no. Recall in the earlier segment where we looked at MacDonald's little lesson about how it is that everyone in hell ultimately says that it's better to reign in hell than serve in heaven, that there's something that a damned soul insists on keeping, even at the price of misery, something they prefer to joy, something they prefer to reality. And that's what we see in the next couple of examples. The first ghost that they run into is a ghost that's continually complaining, continually grumbling. And Lewis is scandalized that this complaining ghost is in hell. I don't understand. She just seems to be an unhappy old woman. Why is it that she would be damned? And MacDonald's response is a very interesting one. He makes a distinction between whether there's grumbling or whether there's a grumbler. That is this just now disembodied complaining? Or is there a real person in there that's complaining, and we can somehow separate out that person from this constant complaining that they're having? One of the points that he makes in The Problem of Pain is that to be a damned soul is in some way not to be completely human anymore. It's to be faculties kind of pretending to be a whole. And that's what's happening with this woman, or at least that's the problem. Is there a real person left? Or has she complained so much that now all that's left is the complaining? They run into a, if you like, flirtatious ghost. This is a ghost whose vanity is not the self-conscious vanity of the very self-conscious ghost who was afraid of what she would look like. This ghost is on the opposite end of the spectrum. She's in her very ghostliness trying to flirt with the bright people, trying to make herself attractive in a sensuous way. And of course, it doesn't work at all. It's ghastly. But it's as if that very form of interacting with people, that I have to make myself attractive, I have to make myself sensuous, or there's no reason for me to interact with others, that's all that's left of this person. Many of the souls from hell come up to heaven and they want to show off their knowledge. They want to show off that somehow they have an appreciation of things. They understand things that the people in heaven don't, that somehow they're sheltered. And when these souls from hell aren't listened to, they just go back to the bus. They have no interest in what's before them. One of the really interesting cases, not only in this chapter but in the book as a whole, is this artistic ghost. This artistic ghost is one who looks at heaven and wants to paint it. And he's very disappointed when he's told that really this is something that you're meant to appreciate, not meant to reproduce. And that in fact his whole career in painting should have been something that opened him up and allowed him to see that there were things beyond the world, beyond his sense experience, that the sensual things that he appreciated in painting were in fact a doorway to higher things, to spiritual beauty. What's happened to this artist is that he has taken the means, the paint, the representation, as a kind of goal into itself. So here he is looking something that has a kind of unearthly beauty to it. But all he can think about is reproducing it according to his art. It's like what you saw earlier with the Episcopal ghost, that this was somebody who was no longer able to understand that inquiry was for the sake of coming to the truth. He was locked into inquiry as a kind of goal unto itself. He had mistaken the means for the end. When I was in college, we read St. Augustine's work on Christian doctrine. It's about biblical interpretation. And one of the things that he says at the beginning of that treatise is how all created goods are to be used, and God alone is to be enjoyed. Now, many of us really struggled with Augustine's teaching, because at the point where everything is to be used, that sounds really unpleasant. We think that there are all sorts of things around us which should be enjoyed, and to assert that in fact God alone is to be enjoyed, that's a hard saying. But of course, what Augustine is pointing out is that any good that you point to in the world is only a partial good. It's a good that somehow shares in God's goodness. And the very reason that it's there is a means to draw us along to that ultimate good. Because it's only God that can make anyone completely happy. Because God is the infinite good. He is the source of all good. He's the sovereign good. So often we want God as a good alongside other goods. And we don't recognize that really the only reason those other goods are good at all is because they somehow share in what God offers. Go back to the principle that MacDonald was appealing to, that every damned soul clings to something at the expense of happiness. What we see with the grumbling ghost, what we see with the flirtatious ghost, what we see with this artist, all of them have some kind of created thing that they're clinging to at the price of their own happiness. That they'd rather complain or flirt or paint than enjoy the source of all goodness. And this is a very real temptation, that if we have any kind of self-knowledge, we recognize that there are things we cling to even though they don't really make us happy. In the next chapter, we'll hear a conversation between one of the ghosts, who is a very frustrated wife, and one of the bright people, as she tries to get her husband back from heaven.